Okay, let's dive right into this, because today we're exploring a profoundly fascinating concept. We're looking at the idea that the blues and gospel aren't just genres of music you might casually listen to on a Sunday morning or a Friday night. Actually, they are the fundamental, structural DNA of almost all American musical heritage. If you really want to understand the music that moves the world today, you absolutely have to understand the bedrock it was built on.
You know, the legendary Wynton Marsalis hit the nail on the head here, and it perfectly captures why this matters to us right now. Almost all the modern music we consume and love, from rock and roll to rhythm and blues, all the way to modern hip-hop and country, is inextricably linked to this exact sentiment. It is not an exaggeration to say that without the blues, the playlist on your phone right now simply would not exist.
So here is our roadmap for this explainer. We'll start with the heart of American music, trace those African roots, look at blurring the sacred and secular, track the migration and evolution, and wrap things up with teaching the blues. We're spanning continents and centuries today, so let's get right to it.
Section 1, the heart of American music and setting the stage.
I want to kick things off by asking you this directly. Was the Reverend Gary Davis a blues or gospel singer? It's a tricky one, right? Because when you listen to him sing about celestial cities, his lyrics are purely sacred. Yet his virtuosic guitar bending, those flattened third notes, and his complex call and response patterns sound exactly like a gritty street blues musician. He beautifully challenges our rigid assumptions about genre and kind of shows us that the dividing line is often an artificial one.
Well, there's a powerful truth here. The blues and gospel actually originate from the exact same human impulses. They're just alternative expressions of the same deep need to cope and endure. Whether we're talking about flashes of virtuosic brilliance or the melismatic articulation, which gives us those highly distinct, flattened third, fifth, and seventh blue notes, both the sacred and secular forms acted as a vital ritual of survival.
Moving on to Section 2, African Roots and Survivals. Let's trace that musical DNA. Think about the geography of the West African savanna hinterland. This core area was the literal birthplace of those characteristic blues traits. It's right here that a fascinating intersection occurred. Arab and Islamic melismatic vocal styles, those wavy, highly decorative singing techniques, merged seamlessly with ancient indigenous African string traditions. It is honestly incredible how these specific musical tools survived the unimaginable horrors of the Middle Passage and then actually thrived on American plantations. We see the West African griot, who was a soloist historian and storyteller, directly mirrored in the wandering solo bluesman. The pentatonic tuning patterns and stringed instruments, like the zalium and goj, were adapted into the banjo and the fiddle. Amazingly, even the diddley-bow, which was this makeshift one-stringed instrument played on the side of a cabin, was a direct adaptation of the Central African monochord zither. These were not just instruments, they were surviving pieces of a highly resilient culture.
All right, Section 3, blurring sacred and secular, two sides of the same coin.
You've got this really fascinating juxtaposition between these two realms. On one side we have the sacred, group spirituals focused heavily on the communal, offering heavenly salvation as a message of hope. Then on the flip side we have the secular, the solo country blues, rooted deeply in the individual's earthy daily struggles. Yet fundamentally, they are twin aspects of the exact same coping strategy. One looks up, the other looks around, but both use the very same musical language to survive.
Now, to understand the necessity of that coping strategy, we absolutely must look at the harsh historical conditions that drove it. Following the repeal of the 1875 Civil Rights Act and the subsequent U.S. Supreme Court validation of Jim Crow segregation laws in 1896, African Americans faced an era of severe enforced segregation. Combined with the highly exploitative sharecropper system, these systemic drivers created immense daily hardship. Furthermore, African American women faced a double oppression in this rigidly divided society. The blues emerged right in the center of this environment, serving as an unfiltered human response and an absolutely vital mechanism for emotional survival amidst these realities.
Section 4, Migration and Evolution, tracking the movement. Tracing this evolution geographically and technologically over a roughly 60-year span, we start in the 1890s with acoustic, rural blues down in the Mississippi Delta and Texas. By the 1920s, it evolves into the more polished, classic blues. The 1940s bring us the city blues with Memphis jug bands and early horns, which finally leads to the massive, amplified urban electric blues of Chicago in the 1950s.
Let's zoom in on the 1920s classic blues for a second. This era was incredibly unique because it provided a powerful platform for female artists like Bessie Smith and Ma Rainey. It's fascinating because it sits right at the intersection of early race records and the suffragette movement. While the male country bluesmen were often wandering soloists, these polished women performers were backed by full jazz bands, breaking massive cultural barriers and achieving unprecedented national success.
Fast forward to the 1950s. The Great Migration has brought millions to northern cities like Chicago. Here, artists like Muddy Waters took the acoustic country blues and plugged it in. The music had to be loud enough to cut through the noise of crowded clubs and compete with horns. This shift to amplified electric guitars with dirty, distorted timbres reflected the gritty, new reality of the northern industrial worker. But more than that, it formed the literal backbone of rock and roll. The Rolling Stones, the Beatles, they were all listening to this exact sound.
Finally, Section 5, teaching the blues and bringing it to the classroom.
When scholars and musicians talk about the blues, you'll often hear the term signifying. Now, I know it sounds like complex academic jargon, but at its core, it's just about the aesthetic power of playful manipulation. It's when an instrument performs a sort of sonic mimicry, creating the illusion of speech. So when a guitar bends a note to sound just like a human cry, or when an instrumental phrase anticipates what the vocalist is about to say, that's signifying. It's an incredibly rich narrative conversation happening entirely within the music itself.
And that playful manipulation directly builds into the famous 12-bar blues structure. It's essentially a brilliant analogy for improvisation. It starts with Step 1, the call, which is a musical or vocal statement. Then Step 2, the response, a complementary answer often played by the guitar or horn. Finally, Step 3, the corroboration, a concluding stanza that resolves the whole thought. This AAB format isn't just some rigid sheet of music. It's a dynamic, breathing conversation that allows students to learn the true art of improvisation.
So to teach this properly, we really need a complete pedagogical shift. We have to build a blues culture in the classroom. That means prioritizing audiation, which is hearing with deep understanding. It means listening to the music, internalizing the groove as style in motion, and repeating those phrases long before anyone ever looks at a piece of sheet music. Ultimately, it's about fostering communal music making, where the classroom acts like an interactive audience, rather than focusing purely on rigid individual recitals.
So here's the crucial takeaway. We've seen how the blues originated from profound human resilience, shaped the musical DNA of the entire world, and provides an incredible framework for improvisation and communal learning. Which leaves us with a final, pretty provocative thought to consider. If the blues is the undeniable foundational bedrock of American music, why is it still conspicuously missing from so many of our modern music classrooms? Definitely something to chew on the next time you cue up your favorite song. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning and keep listening closely.